Okay, so for this part, we're gonna do this exercise number 23. It's on page like 371 of the textbook. This golf score here. So the golf scores has this table and has like 4 rounds that are played by 4 players. So each round had the scores in here, right? And we're going to place the data into an array. It's a use the golf text here. We're just gonna, write this out using a code, or we could actually, well, yeah, we just write it into the code. And then we're going to display the total score for each player. So we're going to add them up pretty much, and then also get the average score for each round. Okay, so the first round here, we'll get the average score. Well, average score for each round, meaning like the first round, what is the average score on this column, the average score on this column for all the players. Okay, so not the average score for the player, but for average score for all the players each round. So you get the result here. Say Jason's so total score is, if you add them up, you get that for each. So this is pretty much just adding the total for each row, and then the average round will be the average for each column. That's all it's saying. Okay, so let's build this table, and then we will kind of transition that into the next the project. It's kind of look very similar to the final project. I mean, for this unit. I'm going to create a new project in this example instead of using form 3. Well, it's okay. We'll just add form 3 is fine. We'll just keep it in same here. So add a new form, or if you're adding a new project, that's fine too. So add a new Windows form 3. And then click add. So we need to design that layout. It's just really, so with the layout meaning like the output, right? So we don't care about this. This is like given to us already, so we don't have to format this output. We just want to output the information here. So it looks very similar to what we already have, right? The button and then a list box. So again, you can just copy that from the other forms. So let me go back to my Solution Explorer and copy from the other form. Form 2 or 1 doesn't matter. So select copy and paste, and we should be good to go. And I'm going to change this name just a little bit to kind of match what's in the book. It says Analyze Golf Scores. Okay, so we're going to change this title, the text here, to say that. So property would be Analyze Golf Scores. Okay. And the button name, let's just change that to like Analyze. Okay. The result will still be the same, just result. Alright, so double click the button, and we're right in here. We're gonna go and then add our arrays. So just get you used to the habit of using subroutines and functions. We're gonna get a sub to populate our array. Usually you can do that in a different method, or if you remember, if you like double click on your form, you have this mybase.load. You can also use this to initialize as well, right? Either way. So that would probably be the preferred method, but I want you guys get used to using functions and subroutines. So we're going to have a sub in here called initialize. Again, init, you can say init array is fine, like we had before. And I'm going to pass the array to this subroutine, and we'll call this again, what's this thing called? Maybe it is called scores, right? It's kind of interesting how we set that up before. So scores, it's a two-dimensional array. Let's put a comma there of integer. Okay, we're not returning anything to subroutine. We're just going to initialize the data. So up here, we want to set our array. So we're going to dim array scores. What's the size here? So it's a 4x4, right? So 4x4. So what should be the index values before both of these? 3, 3, right? So it's the 3, 3. Okay, as integer type. And then we need to call this init array to initialize the scores. We pass a score array to it, and that should initialize the scores. So now, once we do that, we also have, go ahead and then display result. So we could do another function or another routine here that says display. Just get display result is fine. We'll pass the scores to it as well. So when you write this code out, you can do either way. You can think about all the functions you need here, and you put all that in the code here first before you create a sub, or you can go and create a sub first, you put back in there. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so in here somewhere, let me put down here. I'm going to have another sub called display result, and I'm going to pass in the sub, the scores array, right? Just like we did with the initial init array, and this will display the results to the list box. Okay. So what should happen before we display the result? If you look at this, it says place the data, right? So this is the initialization part, and display the total score for each player, and then also take the average score for each round. Okay, so the average score, we need to have another function to calculate the average score for each round. That means this is a repeating, right? So the first round, we need to get the score of that, get the average, return it, and then we go to the next loop, get the average, return it, right? So you can see repetition here, so you can use that average score and a function to return the average back. Okay, so we can write a function for that average score. So we could now say I have another function somewhere in here to calculate the score. So function, you could say get average AVG score, right? Get the average score, yep. And then we want to pass the array to that as well. So the scores. Wait a minute. No. Yeah. So array of scores as integer. For now, let's just say we have that in mind. It could change, okay, depending on how you code it. But when we turn this function as an integer, is it integer? The score average will be double, right? It has decimal values. So not integer, but will be double. So that's double. And inside here we have a return statement somewhere. Return some double values back. Maybe return the AVG score. It will create a variable in here somewhere. We'll call it dim AVG score as double, and then when we get the average, we'll add that to the average score and return that back to the user. I misspelled here. Okay, so we got these in mind. So we initialize the array. Then before we display it, we need to calculate the average, right? So we have another. So how do we do this? Okay, it could happen here before display, or it could happen during inside the display result. So in here, we could display in the result here, we loop through an array to get the average score every time. So we could do that here inside the display result. So inside here, we can call the get average score for each column. Okay, so we decide that later for now, but it will have something like that. We also want to have one for the total scores, right? The total score for each player. So you have another function to do that as well. Okay, so we could have, again here, right below the average, we have another function to get total score. Get total score, yeah, just get total score is fine. And we're going to pass in the scores array as well as integer. And we're returning back just integer because we add them up, we get a total of integer data type. And the same thing here, we can dim a total score, or just total, as integer, and then in the bottom we'll return it back. So return the total back. Okay, so that will satisfy all the error messages, and then we get everything in place. So again, the total score could be called from within the display result subroutine as well. It would not make sense to do here because we're calculating the total score for each player. So if you put like total score for John, display his score, total score for Jason, display his score, that's too much, right? It's too redundant. Okay. You can do it this way, or you can have like a separate routine. Maybe like calculate average scores, and then you would do all the average scores first. You would store that into another parameter, maybe up here in global space, okay, and then you can process it that way. I mean, there are lots of ways to do it, okay, but we do that inside the display results method. So step 1, initialize the array. So back down here, init array scores, and scores is a reference already. We don't have to use the by reference here. So that's the good thing about arrays. Also the bad thing, you might accidentally delete it or modify the code. So what do we do? We have one, so we have to populate with this data here, right? So let me resize this so I can see it. Something like that. I don't know how to see it, but ooh, I lost it. Yeah, this is the one. Okay. And then over here, so the first is Jason Day's record. You could do it, let's see, how do we do this? Okay, I'm going to modify this a little bit, okay? So here, just so that it's a little bit easier. If you do it this way, because we already set up the total size, right? Then I mean that we can pass a score to it, and we do the traditional way would be like, scores, 0, 0 equals, 68, and then you keep going down that list, which is fine, but takes a lot of time. So I'm going to do it this way. Let's see if this works. So if I want to, I was thinking about doing like this. So for example, you don't have to change it yet. I want to show you what I mean. If I do that, okay, I do the visual way. This is much easier this way, for example. So I could start like, for example, the first score would be like 68, 67, 66, 67. So 68, 67, 66, 67. Okay? So that's for the first person. And then you move on to the next score. Okay? You can do it that way. So that's why I wanted to move this, for example, down here. Okay? And then at the end, let me just kind of play with this for a bit. So at the end, I'm going to change this to a function, for example. Let's see if this is the good way. We'll see. And we're going to return the scores back. But now the array will be returned as integer of array. Okay, it will be something like that. And then up here, we'll say score is equal to the function of that. Okay, so this is probably the better the preferred method. I mean, this is just one way. You don't have to do this way. This is one way, but it just so that when we do it this way, we can now easily build our array, initialize it this way. It's much easier. Of course, you could just do it right here in front of that line. That's fine. But again, let's just do it this way, and then we will change the code. So change it to just blank blank equal to init array. Okay. And then inside your init array, you change that to a function instead of a sub. Okay, so you change it the function to a sub to a function. It doesn't take any parameter, but the as data type returns can be an integer array of two-dimensional array. So remember that a function can be also returned back as an array of a single dimension or double dimension. And then inside that function, then we can dim another array called, we call it scores, which is fine. You call it X, doesn't matter. Just a local array here, and we're going to set that to these numbers. Okay, so we got our first player. The second player will be here. Okay, and have a third player will be here. We have our fourth player will be here. Okay, so we have 4 players. So it will look like that. So row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. And we just go ahead and populate those numbers. So as you can see, this is an array inside another array, right? The color braces represents one array. So I got that. Next is 71, 71, 67, 65, 68. Okay, 71, 67, 65, 68. And the third is 71, 69, 64, 69. 71, 69, 64, 69. And finally 69, 67, 68, 70. 69, 67, 68, 70. 69 here. Okay, so we built the array, and then we just return the array back. So this is a two-dimensional array, matches our return data type of two-dimensional array, and that should now initialize it and sets it, and then sets our scores out here in the analyze click button subroutine. And then now we can pass this to the display results, and then instead of display result is what we do our other business logic. Okay, so the first thing is we want to display the total scores for each player. Okay, so that means that we have to loop through the array 4 times, right, to display the total for each of these players. So we keep a score of Jason's, Jordan, Brandon, and Justin's total score. So how do we do this? So we can create 4 variables to store the total, or we can create one array of 4 elements to store their total. Right? So since we are dealing with arrays, let's create a single array to store 4 different total scores. One will be for Jason, one for Jordan, one for Brandon, and so on. Okay, so in here in display, I will create maybe players. What do you call this one? Player what? Total score, right? Something like that. Players total scores is just a single array of integer type, and we have 4 players, so it will be a total of 3 for the index. Okay. So if you look at this, I mean, there are lots of ways to do this. Okay, one way is we can pass this array along with the scores array together to the total score function something here, yeah. And it calculates the total score for each of those, for all of them, and then we in that case we'll just already get the scores here. Or we could do the loop here, and then we loop through that. Each player we just add the scores individually. I'm thinking what's the best way here. What do you guys think? Do we loop through here for each, like, I think like for each row, and we add all the total, or do we loop inside the function to do all at once? Okay, let's do this way. Let's change the function here to not get score. I mean not function, but let's change to a subroutine. Okay, I think we'll do everything here in the average. I mean the total score here. The total score here. Same thing with the average score. So we'll do like what's the best way? Okay, total score. The reason why I choose function is because if you do function, then for each player score, you have to pass along the index for that person. That's why I wanted to change to a subroutine so that you do all the calculation here, and then you will populate that score. I'm thinking like. Okay, yeah, we'll do the subroutine way, and then we'll also do a function if we have time. It just gets a little bit tricky. Okay, so we're going to change this to a subroutine, and so in that case, it's not going to return any data type, and we'll pass both functions and both arrays in here. So we have the scores array, and also we'll also pass the other scores, which is the total array. Maybe total scores array. It's a single dimension integer as well. This is for the average. We'll deal with that. Also change the total score here as well. We'll do the same thing. We'll change it to a sub. So you can copy this here and here. You know, maybe this shouldn't be total score. It should be the average score here. Average scores. Okay, change the average scores. And we'll turn this off for now. So let's get a total score first. It's going to be a little bit different, easier. And we'll change it to sub, so we don't need a return. We don't need a return here as well. Okay, so the total score will be passed along with these scores here. We'll get the total scores for each player. It will store that inside the array. Okay. So inside here, we're going to loop through the array and add all the scores. Okay, so we'll do, we'll use a for loop. Again, that's easier, right? For the column or the row, right? Row as integer, just like before. Integer is 0 to the scores max index of that row. So again, would be scores dot get upper bound of 0. Okay, so for the first row, and then we're going to iterate through the entire column and add them up for that player. Okay, so each row is actually each player. You can change this to player if you want. Okay, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so if that makes more sense, then choose player. Okay, but for now, we use row for now. And then we also want to loop through the column for each column as integer from 0 to scores upper bound of 1. Okay, this is the column. So kind of the same thing what we had earlier. We need to update the total for all of those positions. So the total score here has, if you look at this, total score has 1, 2, 3, 4. So the number of rows will match, right? So the first row, row 0, references Jason's total score. So we're going to add this to the Jason score, add this, each column, add that to that, add that to the previous total, add to the previous total, right? And then when we move to the next row, that'll be Jordan's already scores. Again, you will also increment the other table, other array score as well. So here we could say, like, for example, I could say total score of row. Okay, that's the row, right? Plus equals the scores of row and column, like that. So if I do that way, I don't need to have this parameter here. So row 0, that's the same index for the Jason score. That's Jason's data for row 0. So the array to store the players here also has the row of 0. At the 0, 0 position, add the number from the scores array to the total scores array. Okay, you keep doing that. If this is too complicated, yeah, you can put total here, right? You can put total. I'm showing you a different way. Total here, and then instead of total score here, you put total is plus equals scores plus row column. So you loop the entire row first. Once you are done, then now you can say total score of row, which is still 0. Okay, equals total. Okay, that's easier to see. Once I'm done with that, make sure you need to reset total back to 0. Okay, if you don't, it's going to have an incorrect total. You set to 0 for the next person, next player. The next row is the next player. That's why I say if you put player here, it makes more sense. Okay. See how that makes a lot of sense if you name it this way. For player, and then here I could put like score, right? For each score. See, that makes a difference when you look at that way. So for the player, starting from player 0, they get the score, and then the player score, right? Get the player, the score, player 0, score, 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 player 2, score, 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 right? You get the total for that player, and then you add that to the current player's score, and then you reset the total to 0. You loop again. Okay. And then once you're done, then you are done, because now these are both arrays. I'm not changing the scores array at all. I'm just reading it. But the total scores array is changed because I'm changing the values for those, each of those. So now when I'm done with this, it should have the total score for each player. Okay? And then down here, when I call that and the display result here, instead of saying 3 equals 3 here, I could now say, well, yeah, it is 3, right? Because total of 4. I can now say get total score. I'm going to pass both the scores and the player's total array. Okay? So that will calculate the total score here. Right? And all the scores will be stored inside this player's total scores array. And then I can print it out. So since we have it this way, you could actually move this to this place here. Okay, since we do all at once. But since we have it here, that's fine for now. You can move it all outside, so here we just have display information. Actually, maybe we should do that. Okay, it just makes more sense. Okay, let's move it over, because the display should just display results. So let's copy this, or cut that out, and move it to the main program up here. Okay, and the button analyze, click, paste it here. So we have our player score. Since we're doing this way, we should declare another variable here to store the average score, right? So we do another dim average scores of 3 as well. And we'll pass that along to the average score. And when we display the results, we don't really care about the scores anymore. Okay, we're going to display the player's total score, and we should also pass along the the average score as well. So we could pass both of those here to display, because we don't care about the overall score. And now we need to modify our results to match these two scores array. So let's go down to our display results. Okay, if you don't know where it is, if you just right click, if your code gets really long, if you select that method or that subroutine and do a right click, and if you have go to definition here, it takes you right to it. Okay, so just a shortcut to show you where things are. Instead of looking around, you can just right click and then go to, or press F12, takes you right to that. Okay, so we need to modify this. The first one here is the total score, and it's a single dimension array. The second is the average score. Average scores as integer. Okay, so now we can display that to the list, and it's a single dimension, so it's much easier this time. So we could display that total score first, because we already calculated that, just to make sure it works. So if you look at this, we have the total score, looks like that, right? We put the JSON days information here, we print that out. And of course, their names could have been stored in a separate database or a separate array as well. But we could just put it in here, it's fine. So let's dim another array here. We call it players. There are 4 players as string to store their names, right? But you know what? Do it easy way. Move that number, string equals, and we'll do that. Okay, the first is Jason Day, right? And then comma. The next player is not good at typing. Jordan Smith. I'm going to copy and paste. So Jordan Smith is Smith, and you can just call name whatever you want. You can make it up. It's fine. Since I have it here, I can copy it and paste. You can just call it ABC. It's fine. And then finally, we have these. Last player is Justin. Come on, get out of it. Okay, Justin Rose. So we have the 4 players there. Okay, so now we can display total scores. We'll loop through that array of scores and display to the list box, right? So again, for each, yeah, you can do for each is fine, right? Since we know that, well, maybe not for each, you're going to print the name too. So for I or for row, well, a single row, let's call I is fine, just a single dimension, as integer from 0 to the total scores. Let me spell total scores, get upper bound 0, even though it's 1 dimension, it'll still be 0. Then we want to list this information here. Wait, this is freezing on me now. So student semester average, or not that one. I think it's freezing up. I was going to say Jason's total score and then something like that. We could say here LST list box result dot items add. We'll put it here the players, right, of I, which is Jason. Okay. We want to concatenate that. It says to have like the colon, and then we'll just concatenate that with the total score of I, like that, right? So each row will have Jason Day, his total score. The next two is Jordan Spieth, his total score, and so forth. So we're done with that player's total score. And we'll hold this, let's hope that this works. Okay. I don't see any red marks here, so that means I have no syntax errors. I'm good to go. We haven't implemented the average score yet, but we got the total score, so we'll see if this works. Okay, so I click run, and let's cross our fingers. Oh, it's still running form 2. Okay, doesn't work. Alright, so go to project, properties, and change to form 3. Forgot to do that. Okay, save and close that, and now it should work. Alright, so here we have it. Jason Day and their scores are properly calculated there. So we get that part done. So we just need to do the second part, which is the average for the columns instead now. Okay, so that can get a little bit tricky, but let's take care of that problem. Any questions on this? And let's get if it's complicated, just make sure you review the video again and go over again how this is done. Okay, so let's do the total score. I mean the average score, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll go over the final project, the other project. So the process is kind of the same, right? Instead of getting total score, we'll say the we'll say get average score. We're going to pass the scores along with the average scores array. Not the source, but scores. This is calculate average scores for each round. Okay. So inside here, we'll do kind of the same here. Total, if you look at total, we're adding the total for each row. Okay. This time we're adding the average for each column. So we're reading this direction. Okay. So notice that we're going to reverse the order here. We're going to read the column wise. To go column by column. Okay. Whereas the other way, you go row by row, right? So the syntax will still be the same. Okay, will be similar. So we'll deal here. We'll go dim a avg as integer. We need an average, right, for each column, and then we need to say we loop through that array again. The scores array. So we say for, we do same thing. See, so for each, if you look at this, each of these is it's a round, right? Each round. Okay. So if it makes more sense, you say for each round as integer, start from 0 to the scores. Okay, get upper bound. Let's spell those correctly. Get upper bound of 0. Okay, it's not 0. Okay, we're going by columns first. So each round we're going this way. So that means this is the upper bound of 1. Okay, we get the second index first. So we're going to column first. And then down here, let's say for each score as integer, from 0 to the scores of upper bound of 0. Okay, so you kind of reverse the column and the row here. So if you compare this to the average and the total, you see that the outer loop takes the row first, the column second. Here we deal with the column first, then the row as the inner loop. But the code inside here will still be the same, almost the same. Okay. So we will say average. Well, not average. Will still be total here, right? We should have another one here. Dim total. Wait. Yeah, we add them up, right? We need a total as integer. So we'll do like total is equal to total plus the scores of round and score. Okay. Again, row and column, same thing. So because we are the score here, which is the row, will go much faster than the column. So we're moving row by row for the first column. We get the total of that. Once you get the total of that loop, then outside here is what we do. We take the average, right? So average would be like equal to total divided by how many we have, right? So how do we get that the number? So how do we know how many counts we have here? How many rows? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and there are different ways to get there. One, you could like initially set that to a variable, right? Or otherwise you have to recode that again here, +1. Okay, and you can do that. You can put a paren here to get a total count, right? Because this gave you just the index. No, not 1. It should be 0. Okay. The 0, which is the row, total row. So if it's that, again, if it's too confusing, you always say total like count or something, right? As integer. Sometimes it's easier to see that way, and you put that here. It'll be of 0. That gives you in the +1. Okay, the total count of items in that table, number of rows. Since we're dealing with the rows, if you do the average for the column, then this will be different. So now I could say this replaces this whole thing here, and that gives me the average. But that only gets me the average for each round. After that, I need to store into the average scores array, right? So here then, I can now say the AVG scores array of still the round 0 equals the AVG. Okay? And once I'm done with that, don't forget to reset your total back to 0. Just like before. Reset it to 0. The average will also, average you don't have to reset it, it's fine, because we're going to reset it here anyway. And then the next round will be the second round, which is 1. And then it will loop the whole thing again, get a new total for that second round, and take the average of that, modify the round to 1 to the new score, average score, and resets the total, and repeats the whole thing again. Again, both arrays are passed to as references, so you don't have to worry about returning anything at all. Okay, so I hope that would get all the average scores, and we just need to output the round average into 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay? So we got that part done, and then now we need to go back down to the display results, and now we deal with that display average score. Okay, so we do kind of the same thing here. So we'll do like for j this time as integer 0 to the average score dot get upper bound of 0. Okay, and then we just print out this table here. So the first is the number colon the score. So we'll say ls2 result dot items dot add. We're going to add, the first thing is the number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. So we don't want to put j will be 0, so we'll say j plus 1, right? And then we need to concatenate that with a colon space, and then concatenate that again with the scores, average score for that position. So the average scores of j. And if you want to force that to a 2 number position, just put n2 here, right? Or n2, and that will force it to a number with the average of 2 decimal places. If you get a 1 decimal place, you might have just 1. It's kind of look not really consistent. And so I think that should display the result. I didn't put that text here, round average here. If we do that, you put that above here. So let's do that as well. So let's do result items dot add. Okay, notice we have a empty space from the previous. I shouldn't put a go for the total as well. We'll modify that a little bit here. So we want to add a VB carriage return. Okay, carriage line feed here. We add that there to give that empty space, and then we can now say round average. Okay. I can copy this as well and put above these total scores, right up here, and we can put like golfers total up here. You just give it a new line and then that there. Now let's see if this will print out what we're looking for. Okay. So click start, and then well, something's wrong here. I didn't get the line feed thing, but these looks okay. Did they match? I don't know. So 268, 271, 73, 74 match, but the scores down here doesn't match, and it's kind of close, but they don't match up, which means they are incorrect, right? So what could have gone wrong? I mean, the formatting looks okay. It's just that the numbers don't match up. So we need to go back into our average loop and figure out why, because we have duplicating data here. Okay, so obviously this one didn't work for some reason. So I'm gonna just put that there, and then we'll add a blank one above it. Just put like a blank one like that. I'll use the same. So up here you don't need that, the first part. So average scores J to string into. So let's go back and look at our average, see what we did wrong. So on the average, for each column and then for each row, we read the column and row, we add them out to total, is total divided by total count. So the total will be 1, 2, 3 plus 1 should be 4. Oh, okay. So the average here is what I did wrong. It should be a double type. Okay. So the average should be a double. I have an integer. So let's change that to double. Maybe that might resolve the issue. Because we lose all the decimal places. And then we take the average, we add it to the average score, and then we are done with that. Okay, so let's save that and run it again and see if that would make a difference. And still doesn't. Okay, so alright, so let's see what's going on here. Or do we calculate that average score? Get average score, scores, average scores. Get average score, average scores. Scores around 0 for each round. We add all the totals. Total divided by total count, and then we reset our total. Yeah, so right, so I had this wrong. This has to be swapped around because we're doing the score. The row will move faster than the column, even though we call it this way. So this will be the score here, okay, for this inner here, and this will be the round here. So you're moving the first row at that 0 row, like 0, 0. Second row, still 0. Third row, 0. Fourth row, 0. Okay, so that's fine. And then we'll go to the next column, 1, and then still row, so 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, and so on. I think the problem is this here. This should be a double type. The average score should be double, because I'm removing all the maybe all these decimal places. So let me change that to double. Our code up here also needs to be changed to double. The array up here. Let's see if that's the case. What I do here, the display also down here, the display result, we need to change that as well. So right here should also be double. See if that solves the problem. Right, let's try it again, and it looks much better. Yeah, I think the initial problem was we had forgot to swap out the row and column number index, and also the array should be double type because it's average decimal values. Okay, so that's one way how you tackle this problem, is by you get the total score if you pass 2 arrays to it, okay, and then you can manipulate the data in here. You can do all this all at one time, and then when you complete with this, the total score, the average, you're also populating this array here, and then when you come back to where it was called, that this total scores here have the results already. Okay. So this way you do all at one time. Another method is what I showed you earlier, is that instead of doing this way, you will loop through that array and you do for each person. And if you do that, then you have to pass the index for each player. Right? So for example, if I were to do something like for I, let's say for player as integer, okay, 0, for example, 0 to in this case it would be like 3, right? 2, 3, and then I need to next I need to now pass in the array index for each player. So that means when I have a score, like for example, get score, get total, right? I will pass in the array, which is the scores array, along with the index player index. So it knows that it needs to grab only that row to get the total. So if I, for example, do that score 2 here, and just to quickly show you how that looks like, this will be a maybe like a DDM a total here, total 1, for example, as integer, or yeah, this would be like total 1 is equal to that. Or you could have an array as well, maybe like for example like array of 3. Okay, and then here would be the array of player. You do each player this way. This is one way. You can pick and choose which is more efficient. And then inside the function here, you have to be a function of get total scores 2, and you have the scores, right, as integer. And you have also the player, or the index, doesn't matter, as integer. And you're returning back a integer. Okay, so in here, so now you can loop through this array of index here. So you just need to care about the row and the column can be will change. So here we'll do like for column as integer from 0 to the max of score, right? Score get upper bound of 1, okay, for each column. And we're going to say like, so you have a total here also, right? You get total, dim total as integer here. You can say here, total plus equals the scores index of column. Okay, because the index will always stay fixed. We don't care about that row or that right. So the first one comes through will be just row 0, and then I did something wrong. So row 0, you pass that to the array. It comes down here at the row 0 of that column. So you see the loop doesn't. You don't have the two loops because the index is fixed, right? And then you get a total, and then finally you just return it back. Return the total back to where it was. And we did something wrong here as well. Function total scores, and then not player, but it is player. Thank you. Yeah, so you can do it this way, and then if you once you're done, then the average, the total array here would have the entire score of this as well. So if I were to replace this right here with just the total, okay, and if I do that, and let's just say we don't have to call this one here at all. Let's see if that still works. Oh, we can leave that alone. It's fine. So you can see that I still get the same result, right? It works just like before. I get my total score here. Okay, this is the other part. Just by doing this way, I loop through each player. I pass in the index each time to call this second function. But this one, all it does is it loops through that same row. Whereas this one here, I loop through every row, or down here, every row, every column, and then you do the total here, and then set to the array here. So either way you do it is fine. Okay, so there's a lot of ways to do it. A lot of ways. So doing this way, you have to keep track of the index. If you want to do the total count of the average score, you can do the same thing. You do exactly the same thing here, except now you're passing the index for the column instead of the row. So when you code in here, it will look kind of similar to this, except now it will be column here or be row here, and this will be the index. So the opposite of the other one, of this one here. Okay, so either way is fine. Okay.